All right. Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone. Really happy to see everyone on the call today, joining us for another Adobe DITAWORLD. We're really excited to have you all with us, and I think we're just a little bit over the halfway point. And one thing you didn't mention, Stefan, was that we did have a bit of a Wisconsin takeover of the DITAWORLD here over the past hour, and then for the next minimum of 45 minutes, as you mentioned, right? So Briggs and Stratton is located actually right up the road from me, and so my friend John is a Wisconsinite, as am I. So Wisconsin is taking over DITAWORLD at least for the next 45 minutes or so. Those of you who haven't met me before, I am Chad Dybdahl, Solutions Consultant with Adobe Technical Communications, and I'm really excited to be joining you all today here to talk about, back up a little bit, a content emergency, right? So we're going to go through an emergency content situation, and we've seen a lot of presenters over the past day and a half, let's call it 2 days, showing you really what the end product is like, right? So with PwC, IFRS, Cisco, Kone, the list goes on, FAA, Gulfstream, Briggs and Stratton, they all kind of walk you through what does that end user experience look like? And that's obviously a very important part of the way we deliver our content. But I want to walk you through a little bit about the other side of the screen, right? The other side of the glass, and who's working on this content, who's putting this content out into the world, how are we delivering it? And I want you to think, I think very, very quickly here about this. Have you ever had a content emergency? So last minute changes that need to get pushed through, things that may have fallen through the cracks that have been collected, and now we need to get them out the door very quickly. So this idea of a content emergency, and that's really what I want to talk about today, and show you a way that XML documentation for Adobe Experience Manager can actually help with that. So think about these maybe last minute content changes. Never happens, of course. But in the off chance that we may have come into a situation that we weren't necessarily prepared for, you might envision in your mind, if you've ever gone through something like that, currently going through something like that, in which case, why are you watching me? And certainly, it's the sort of thing that I think we can all relate to, right? Needed to make a change to some documentation, we need to make a correction, we need to add some new content in a very, very rapid way. And a lot of times we don't have processes or tools in place to help us with that. So that's what I want to think about and talk about over the course of the next hour or so. So you think about, and this is common, right? So especially in the software world, maybe not so much in manufacturing, like we just talked about with John, but a feature may be determined that it's not ready, right? So we're not going to release with that feature. We're going to pull that from this release. We're going to go ahead and republish our content and not mention that feature anywhere, right? And that could be all over the place, depending on the way you're currently managing your content. So that might be one example of a content emergency. The one we'll look at here today is, well, there's a new feature that we're putting in the product, and you know what? We didn't tell you about it. We didn't involve our technical writers early on in the process for this feature, right? We didn't involve them in creating the documentation when it should have been created during the development process, right? So this is the one that I'm really thinking about today. And of course, pardon me, right before the presentation, I got something, so please don't mind me muting every once in a while. But a new feature that nobody bothered to mention until, let's call it the day before the release. So things don't always go according to plan, right? That's, I think, probably a Murphy's Law, right? If something can go wrong, it will. If a new feature needs to be added to the release a day before it goes out the door, it will be. So, and that's assuming that there was a plan in the first place. So we can certainly think about and hopefully prepare for these types of situations. But when a fire's raging in the kitchen, right, we don't necessarily think about our fire escape plan right away. We simply react. And so that's another thing we want to think about, is bringing structure into the equation, not necessarily reacting to this type of situation, this content emergency, but instead being proactive, right? Setting up this structured environment that's going to bring us the tools we need in order to effectively deal with content emergencies and other situations when and if they do arise. So if you imagined a situation where you did have a content emergency, think a little bit, or maybe even enter into the chat. What did you do to put out that fire, right? What kind of tools were involved? How much overtime did you have to work? Did you have to stay late on a Friday when you really wanted to get to your weekend? So you think about how you put out those fires, and we're going to call our technical publications department here our content first responders, right? So we've given them a fire hose, and right now this fire hose could be any tool, right? It could be Microsoft Word, but this is you guys here, the technical publications team, putting out our content emergency, in this case in the form of a fire. So let's now imagine a scenario together. Okay? It's going to be one of the ones I talked about before, but certainly I want to kind of take you through this brief journey of what this technical writer, let's call him Chad, is going through as we're trying to get this content out the door of a product releasing tomorrow. Maybe it's a new version of the product, right? We have to update the content. We've been working on that for a while. As content comes in, as features get added, as part of the agile development methodology, perhaps, that we're part of, hopefully we're part of as technical communicators. We have deadlines, right? So we have a release date that we've set. And as a result, because we're good at our jobs, right, we've actually, we're already ready with the documentation. We might be waiting on one or two approvals, right, because our approvers are very busy as well, and they perhaps haven't provided all of the feedback that we need, but more or less, we're set, right? We're ready to ship this documentation in support of tomorrow's release. And then you get an email, right? And this is not an unusual circumstance. I'm sure you get thousands of them all the time, but you get a very specific email. And you get this from, well, it's from me to me because I was trying to look it up. But we've got this email from our product manager, who also happens to have the same unusual name I do, that we have this brand new feature that we're actually adding into the release, which is, by the way, tomorrow. And we need to include documentation. And by the way, we've provided with you with this lovely Word document that has all of our documentation for the super cool new feature that nobody mentioned until now. It's a really good feature name. Think about how you may have reacted, or you might react to that message. Excitement is probably not the first reaction that comes to mind. And when I was thinking about this, I have this. I enjoy meme culture, right? So one of my favorite memes came to mind, and if you're familiar with meme culture, you will recognize Meme Man. And this is a 3-panel description of perhaps what your reaction might be as told by our friend Meme Man. So you can see in the first panel, there's a super cool feature that nobody mentioned until now. And Meme Man, and by extension, our technical writer, is panicking. But, second panel, the project manager provided documentation. Calm. Meme Man is calm, and so is our technical writer. However, there's a twist, and it leads to even additional panic, which makes him blurry, much like a Sasquatch, by the way. This content has been provided to us in a Word document, and maybe we're a little in a panic state about that. What are we going to do with this Word document? We've got to incorporate it into all these different locations and things like that. And so that kind of calm panic response is certainly, I think, something that maybe some of us can. So it is time to call upon our content first responders. When we see this, that's going to be our technical writers, that's going to be you guys, right? And instead of just a fire hose, now we're going to give you a different tool for fighting this fire, for putting out this raging inferno, as my perhaps overly colorful subtitle for this talk described. So that logo, if you don't recognize it or maybe haven't seen it before, is the Adobe Experience Manager logo. Specifically, we're going to be looking at, probably to no one's surprise, XML documentation for Adobe Experience. So we've given our first responders here new tools in order to put out these content emergencies. By the way, they're also useful most of the rest of the time as well. So this is not actually that big of a problem. Not when we have the right tools, not when we have the right people using those tools, and not when we have the right strategy for actually dealing with these problems. So if you have the right tools, and the next slide is probably not going to be a big reveal, I'm going to suggest that the right tools for this job include and maybe entirely encompassed by XML documentation for Adobe Experience Manager. And that is, if you have not been paying attention over the course of the past day and a half, Adobe's Data Component Content Management System that is seamlessly integrated with our digital asset management and our web content management platform that we call Assets and Sites. So one of the things we see a lot, right, is this kind of cobbling together random point solution. So, like John was talking about in the previous session, it came to us from another DITA CCMS, right? Those typically are, and I'm not trying to be disparaging, but those are typically point solutions. Typically a standalone solution that you would then integrate with other solutions. So I've got a CCMS, I need some delivery platform, so I need to get that taken care of, and then I might want to have some APIs, and so I need to have a data lake that I'm pouring things into. So we see a lot of these kind of point solutions, right? This kind of bundle of solutions all kind of cobbled together, and what we want to bring to the table as Adobe is no more, right? We want to bring one integrated solution for all of content emergency. And that's going to include data component content management. That's going to happen deep within the Adobe Experience Manager repository. So it's going to provide that component content management solution that we've been kind of looking at and talking about over the course of the past couple of days. We're going to easily import unstructured content into the solution, and that's going to be an important part of our of the fire hose, right, that we're talking about. So that Word document that our project manager provided. We want to be able to easily import that content into Adobe Experience Manager, transform it to DITA, right? Get the structure in place, and then very easily push it out the door as part of our next release, which, by the way, is again tomorrow. So that all lives on top of a robust enterprise digital asset management platform that we call Adobe Experience Assets. And that's what's going to give us our version control. That's what's going to give us our taxonomy management. That's what's going to give us workflow, reporting, and so forth. So we have this content repository being built up in Adobe Experience Manager Assets. And because we've added the XML add-on for AEM, to that, the XML documentation add-on, it also is, we're leveraging all of that and transforming it into that full-fledged enterprise DITA component content management. The other end of that, right, when I'm creating content, I'm really just working with it and versioning it, and reviewing it, applying tags to it. But the other component of this is delivery. Delivery is key, right? And that's what we've been looking at, with Kone, Cisco, PwC, and others this week, is this idea of using a scalable, modern, industry standard delivery platform called Adobe Experience Manager Sites that, by the way, is directly connected to, not integrated with, it's part of the same platform as our CCMS. Keep all of our information in one place, and then I can, with a couple of clicks, publish that and give a live website experience to my customer. And that's really the key, right? It's this end-to-end solution for managing, creating, publishing, viewing, translating my, in this case, DITA content, but really all of my enterprise content. I can bring all of my content, all of my digital assets can come into this platform, use that shared taxonomy, use those same workflows, really bring everything together, standardize on a platform. For our technical content, we want to standardize DITA XML, bring that into the table, but we can have other types of content in there as well. For example, Assets works really well, you may not be surprised to learn, with Adobe Creative Cloud products, right? So we can bring all of that in, integrate Photoshop, integrate Illustrator, integrate InDesign with AEM as well. So it's one place for all of the creative activities in the organization to occur. And that hub then becomes also a place to share that content. So really it is one platform to rule them all. And then in that context, in the context of our DITA CCMS, we bring a lot of features to bear, right? So John touched on this actually in his presentation a little bit ago. He showed you our XML editor. He mentioned he was excited to get his team on board working in this environment, right? It's a deeply integrated XML authoring experience that we bring to the table, directly integrated with our content repository. And to me, that's really important because even Adobe's own FrameMaker product, right? That's a desktop tool. You can go in, it's integrated with AEM, but it's not native, right? FrameMaker obviously grew up way before AEM. It was not designed alongside to work with exactly the same content repository that AEM works with. It's a wonderful tool for authoring, right, and publishing and getting that WYSIWYG PDF experience in FrameMaker. But even FrameMaker can't match the level of integration that we see here, right? So I can have my reusable contents here defined in a side panel, right? It's just right there. I can drag it in. I think one of the interesting things I heard, I think it was maybe in the IFRS presentation, was because it's all web-based, I can bookmark individual topics. I can bookmark different folders. I can just navigate right to them. Whereas in a traditional CCMS, what I'm going to see is really, there's no way to do that, right? It's not browser-based. So here I've got a completely browser-based, deeply integrated XML content creation experience, right? That's going to give me everything I need to work with this content right on the web, right? I don't need to install anything on my desktop. I don't need to update things constantly. Whenever there's changes, we're just going to upload or update that for you on the back end and give you this really clean, really, really powerful, yet still simple XML authoring experience. We're also going to do content management. Okay? So we're going to have this idea of version control, managing versions, tracking changes from one version to the next, and actually reverting to previous versions and creating something like a branch, right? So we're going to have this sophisticated content management and version management capability as well, all as part of our platform. That also extends to the idea of taxonomy management, applying tags to content, creating search facets from those tags, and so forth, right? So we're going to bring not only content creation, but content management into one platform, one place for everybody to come and work in their content across the organization. We're also going to bring some review capabilities here, right? So this is a collaborative review, and I think we've heard this talked about a couple of times here, where this is something that really brings our reviewers to the content. And I think about traditional, especially in the data space, right? We see a lot of PDF-based reviews. FrameMaker actually has a wonderful PDF-based review tool, but it still involves kind of publishing something out and bringing it back in and importing it and things like that. It really works well. Here I'm bringing my reviewers to the content, right? I'm not sending content to them. I'm bringing them together so they can actually work together to mark content up using some very simple but powerful tools here. Bring them into the same environment where the content lives. They can see it together. They can see it in context. You can see I have a number of different topics displayed here, so I can see the full context provided by my content, provided by my map. We'll be able to go ahead and gather that feedback really seamlessly in a really easy way that doesn't require them to jump through a lot of hoops. We'll make it as easy as possible for our reviewers to get that feedback to us. Obviously, translation is a huge component of a lot of our customers' workflows. We've heard not only John from Briggs and Stratton, but others talk about the translation requirements they have and how we can actually facilitate that using the workflow capabilities in Adobe Experience Manager, as well as the language and translation vendors that we can actually connect to using APIs and existing connectors for a wide range of different vendors in this space. Right? So we have a lot of different capabilities here, a lot of different vendors that we can support, and a really seamless workflow for actually managing multilingual content within it. And then ultimately, we need to publish and deliver this content. So you can see we have, we're taking a look at our map dashboard here, and we'll get a little hands-on time here in a moment. But you can see we have a lot of different publishing options. This is by no means an exhaustive list, right? So we certainly have a lot of different publishing options here, even for different audiences, different brands, et cetera. We can bake that all into the tool and make that available here as well. And then ultimately that delivery experience, right? And we saw, I think some really great examples of this when PwC's, particularly their session yesterday, really, really sophisticated delivery of very, very complex and very sophisticated content, right? And that all is going to happen, at least here, in the context of Adobe Experience Manager. That's going to be our hosting platform, where that's where we drive our content to. That's where we drive our customers to. That's where we gather our analytics from, and that's where we can do things like audience targeting and things like that as well. right? So that being sort of the logical endpoint for our content, right? Migrate, which is something we'll take a look at in a moment. Create, which we'll also touch on briefly. We're going to skip through translate everything up into delivery, right? Because we're having a content emergency and we need to actually seamlessly migrate this Word document that my project manager provided to me and get that incorporated into my documentation. We want to bring that, as I've mentioned, kind of this idea of a shared taxonomy, this idea of search facets that don't just apply to my technical content. It might apply to my marketing content as well, or any content that has to do with a specific product, or business unit, whatever the case might be. We want to have this robust shared taxonomy applied all over the place to our content, right? Every piece of content should be tagged, it should be searchable, it should be findable based on that taxonomy. And this is a quick plug, and I know Stefan has been doing some plugs as well, but I do have a webinar coming up next month about how we can use Adobe Sensei to automatically tag and categorize content as it comes into Adobe Experience Manager. So I do hope you'll sign up for that as well. We're really excited to start sharing some of the things that only Adobe can do with our machine learning and AI platform, Adobe Sensei. No one else has the breadth of knowledge and experience in that area than Adobe. We also want to drive these great content experiences, and we've seen countless examples of those over the past couple of days. And I mentioned a number of the presenters that showed us the really cool things that they're doing with AEM and their data content, those experiences they're driving, and really making the content that much more valuable for their audience. And it's all going to be, as I've mentioned a little bit before, in this one single, completely integrated platform, right? It's not, I'm getting my content in my CCMS and then I'm sending off my published output someplace else for maybe a web team to put up and have that hosted, or putting it into data lake and hopefully doesn't drown in there, right? So we want to have this completely integrated platform which really empowers technical communicators and technical authors to actually self-publish this content, right? They can drive that entire workflow from start to finish to rely on a web team or IT to go ahead and drive this experience, right? We can bring this all together once it's set up and configured and ready to go. The web team is largely, the technical communications team is largely self-sufficient using AEM. So enough of my talking and slides. Let's put out a fire together, right? So I'm going to go ahead and unshare my slide deck here, and we should, behind the deck, see Adobe Experience Manager. And so like I mentioned, we have kind of talked a little bit about and been shown over the past couple of days the really cool stuff that people are doing on the delivery side. And we'll get there, right, in the next 10 to 15 minutes. But, for the purposes of this demonstration, this is really intended to be a hands-on session where we kind of show you how the sausage is made. Right? We haven't looked at a lot of the sausage making capabilities, and that sausage is delicious. Everybody loves that. But we haven't really looked at, what does that look like for an author? What's a day in the life of an author here in AEM? And so, as an author, when I come in and log into AEM, this is what I'm going to be presented with. This is my home page. But more importantly, I was also presented with this email from my project manager that has the super cool feature that nobody mentioned until now, documentation. And I've got to figure out, because we do structured authoring, right? We didn't have an arrangement in place with our project management team about what this content actually looks like when it comes to us. So we're going to go ahead and take this Word document, which is, I'm just going to fitting in here. But we want to take the provided content that we were given, and I actually want to go ahead and migrate that into AEM. So let's do that now. So I mentioned we do have this, this idea of AEM assets. That's our content repository. And so that's where we're going to be doing the first little bit of our work here. Pardon me. And you can see we've got this folder-based hierarchy. And I'm actually going to go into a special folder that I've set up specifically for content migration. And we'll look at Word, a Word document today, but there are a number of other source formats that we can actually import. And I was noticing in the chat that somebody had talked about that they had migrated content from Quark to DITA. That is not one of the workflows that we currently have available, because I hope not too many people actually have to do that anymore. But some of the sources we do support would be things like Microsoft Word, HTML in all of its various flavors. We can go ahead and transform DocBook to DITA. We can grab custom XML. So if you've got some other custom XML schema, not DocBook because there's an existing transform for that. But I'm working with a customer right now that has a very mercifully simple XML format that that they want to transform to DITA and then ultimately back again on the back end, right? So we wrote a quick little style sheet to go ahead and form that, and then I can go ahead and simply upload my custom XML to a special folder, and that'll be transformed to DITA. So we have a number of these supported source formats, not pictured here, but also included would be something like unstructured FrameMaker. Markdown content can either be migrated or actually consumed natively as part of a DITA map. We can also support, what am I missing here? Doesn't matter. Oh, InDesign. InDesign was the other one, right? So lots of different source formats that we can support migration, getting it out of that unstructured environment and into a nicely structured. So you can see I've got this folder full of Word documents here, and I'm just going to go ahead and take that document I was showing you, and I'm going to take it and I'm just going to drag it and drop it into this Word files folder. So you can see at the top it's been given this little processing ribbon, so we can actually understand that it's actually being processed at the moment, and that's maybe not quite accurate because it should be done, right? So once I upload that into my Word folder, my Word files folder, I am then going to be presented with a folder of, first of all, a map. You can see a few seconds ago, somebody created this map. That was me. And we also have just a handful of topics here, mostly for just speed. So I uploaded that Word document. We went ahead and not everybody knows that Word is actually the most widely used XML editor on the planet. Behind the scenes, everything is in this nightmare of an XML format called OpenOffice XML. But we can go ahead and extract the XML content from that in the form of a map and topics. So before I do anything with this, I'm just going to take my new feature document here, my map and topics, and I'm going to move that into the the source folder for the product that's releasing tomorrow. So that's in part of my software division. It's actually going to be in my AEM forms documentation. So I'm just going to move that over so that we actually have all of my content in one place. You can see now I do have my AEM forms documentation. This new feature doc has been added as a subfolder. So let's actually take a look at that. So here's the map that we actually extracted from that Word document. We have just a handful of not super helpful content here, but you can actually see that we did extract nice DITA content out of our Word document. But I'm releasing a whole product, right? I'm not just releasing this one feature. So the beautiful thing about the DITA standard is that we have all of these different levels of content reuse. So we've talked about reusing topics, for example, and actually repurposing the same topic for different manuals using conditional text, and we can certainly do all of that here. We've got a great conditional text feature here that allows us to really easily define those things. But the map itself that I just created is also a level of reuse in the DITA standard. So maps can be reused maps, topics can be reused maps, and then we also have more granular reuse use cases. By saying that 10 times fast, at the note level, for example, or even the individual word. Although, as we've kind of discussed in the last hour or so, that kills our translation strategy. So that kind of paragraph or individual sentence is really a good level of granularity to limit ourselves to. But in any case, I've got this map. I've got the topics in support of this super cool new feature that nobody mentioned until now. And I'm actually going to go ahead and exit out of here. And I want to actually just include this content in my parent map. So this is going to be, we'll imagine this is the documentation for the product that's shipping tomorrow. And maybe I want to actually edit this. Incorporate that map that I just imported from my project manager. I want to actually incorporate that into my main map. I like to turn on tags here when I do that. And maybe that falls under installation, configuration, and deployment. So here, I want to go ahead and actually add a new map ref. And I'm going to be prompted to select. Should be that. There we go. So I'm going to actually include this map, the map that we were just looking at for our super cool new feature that nobody mentioned until now. I'm just going to incorporate that into my main map. So pretty straightforward. And then I'm just going to save a new version here. Once I do that, we'll see it update over here on the left. And I can actually, just like I was navigating it before, I can go ahead and open up some random gibberish about the super cool feature. So we can go ahead and start working with this content here. So it might be that we need a short description here, right? Maybe that didn't come through, so maybe I want to clean this up a little bit. So I can go ahead and actually add content there as well. Save a new version of that. So what have I done so far? I've received that startling email from my project manager. I've taken that Word document, I've imported it into AEM and generated a DITA map and topics from that. I've made some small changes to one of the topics, and I've also incorporated that content into my main map that's going to generate ultimately my deliverable in support of that release that's happening tomorrow. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm just going to close out of my XML editor here, and we saw a little preview of this, but if I click a map in AEM, I'm actually going to be brought to what we call the map dashboard. This is where all the magic happens for all of the different things we've been talking about, right? So I can see my list of topics. I can go ahead and apply tags to all of my topics that are referenced in this map, for example. I can create condition presets. This is going to be similar to a Dybdahl, right? So we have this kind of nice GUI for creating condition presets here. There was some talk about baselines before, so I can actually lock a specific version of this map to specific versions of each topic. And as you can see here, other references that it contains. And I can also do some reporting and translation, which we touched on. But I don't have time for any of that right now. We have a content emergency on our hands. So instead of worrying about translation, I'm just going to go ahead and select these two publishing jobs here down at the bottom that are going to actually push this content out to my documentation portal in real time. Go ahead and generate that. This is not a massive map, so it should not take a super long time to publish. This is an invitation, maybe 20 seconds or so. I'm actually running 2 publishing jobs here. My AEM site is done, and again, that's where we're going to host this content, and the PDF shouldn't be too far behind. There we go, as if on cue, and it's ready, right? I can go ahead and actually take a look at this content now. There it is. I can actually find some of the content that was already here, but I can also find information about the super cool feature that nobody mentioned until now. So this is a great way to test our ability as technical communicators to quickly get content out the door. Here's some information about activating the super cool feature that nobody mentioned until now, and so forth, right? So it's really, really seamless. As long as I've got this infrastructure, all these processes, and all these, if I've planned ahead, I can really easily incorporate new content from any source into my documentation portal at a moment's notice. And by the way, I also get oh, of course it's not. There should be a downloadable PDF here today. Done something wrong there. But in any case, that's the end of the story, right? That's how we bring together content from a disparate source, right? So bringing content from Microsoft Word, for example, into AEM, into structured data, and ultimately able to publish that out with just a few clicks, and able to get that out the door just in time for the release tomorrow. So with that in mind, I am done with my presentation, and I'm happy to start taking questions.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks, Chad.
And I gave you 1 extra minute. You said it's 45 minutes minimum. It is now 46.
You went over by a minute.
You're on the spot. You're up a second. Do you have German ancestors?
I do.
Chad, we have a few questions here. One question is from Adam. Adam would like to know one problem we have had using Adobe's tools is that many of them require the Creative Cloud. Many of our assets are isolated and do not have access to the internet. Is Adobe Experience Manager or other Adobe tools becoming available for a closed-off system?
Adobe Experience Manager.
I mean,
go ahead.
There might be some desktop tools, but a cloud solution is difficult to be offline. That is somehow mutually exclusive, I would say.
We do have.
But of course, you could run AEM on a server that is completely disconnected from the internet, right? Or
yeah,
maybe for licensing
also,
but
yeah. I mean, we do have customers who have this type of requirement, right? We were talking with, I forget who it was, but they have essentially a secure room in which they do their writing, right, and other activities, right, engineering, other types of things. And that secure room is completely self-contained also from a networking perspective.
Air gap.
So one of the things we talked to them about was, okay, if you want to do this, obviously the cloud is not an option for you. So you can actually have a box in the room running AEM as a service. You certainly could do it that way. And we do have what we would call an on-premises licensing model that would allow you to do that. It's not the most common thing, but certainly possible.
There was another great question regarding assets outside of the Adobe ecosystem. So, for instance, can you address things like CorelDRAW graphics or other formats or systems that might be outside of the Adobe world, and how well those integrate into AEM?
Sure. So the integration obviously is not going to be as good as Creative Cloud would be.
As robust, yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's Adobe and Adobe, but certainly we can in AEM Assets itself store any type of asset, essentially. and we provide a number of different ways to. If you have Corel running on your desktop, obviously, we can have a piece of middleware that allows you to go ahead and check out that asset from assets, work on it in Corel, and then check it back in. So, certainly the DAM functionality, and I love saying it, that's fun. The DAM functionality, that DAM functionality, it certainly works with lots of different file types. Yep. It's just that, of course, Adobe integrates better with Adobe.
Well, PNG and JPEG, for example, are not Adobe formats, yet need to be managed. So
correct.
You can think of it from that perspective, that it's just a flat file, maybe not enabling much functionality, but certainly accountable and trackable.
Yeah, versionable, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a question from Mitch Abramson. Do your publishing options use Ditto Open Toolkit pub types, or are they your own proprietary delivery mechanism? That depends on the output channel.
It does, yes. But as a general rule, out of the box, we do ship with Ditto Open Toolkit, and even the AAM sites output you were seeing is actually an extension of the HTML5 transform in Ditto OT. So out of the box, we do provide Ditto Open Toolkit as our publishing engine, but we can also use more sophisticated publishing engine like FrameMaker Publishing Server, which is going to help you get a really WYSIWYG type of PDF output, a much better designed PDF than you'd be able to do with Ditto OT, which is not a lot of fun to work with.
You take the next one, Matt?
Well, certainly. One I'm not familiar with, so I'm looking forward to the answer here. Can we use the same configuration process with OSGI?
Oh.
Do you know what OSGI is? Because I don't.
So that is a little more technical than I am going to be prepared to deal with on the call today. OSGI is one of the underlying technologies for AAM. And so we can certainly take that question offline, but you do not want any answer.
Not a short answer.
No.
Okay, Matt. I need to check with the next speakers. So maybe you can take over the next couple of questions.
It's been well over a year since I've seen Chad in person, so good to get a chance to check in.
Yes, it is.
Yep. Okay, so we talked about the content emergency example when all the source content is in English. So we're going to go into advanced mode here. And what if you have dozens of languages to support and everything having been localized? How does that change that perspective, or how does that change that workflow?
Well, I mean, it depends on how you're translating, first of all, right? So I was really interested in what John was talking about with simplified English and how that can streamline a lot of translation workflows. But obviously, if you're doing human translation, that's not happening overnight, more than that, at least with any kind of significant volume of content. So you would absolutely need to build in some type of cushion there. If you can get to a place with really good STE-based content, right, and have that largely machine translated, I would think we could facilitate that be in a much kind of more expedient way.
Well, I recall within the Palo Alto networks configuration. Of course, they were one if not the beta for the AEM add-in for XML and all that good stuff. Yeah. Within their workflow, they were doing a very highly machine translation oriented workflow, and thus for them, they would check out, make some edits, check back into AEM, and then that was going out to their multilingual websites as a matter of course. So of course the back end becomes much more complex, right, as you add that those other components and that automatic processing. But automatic processing is automatic processing. It may take a little time, but as long as it's all pushed in.
Yeah, once you build that workflow, right, that's a repeatable process, as opposed to something where where we're running around with our chicken heads cut off.
Yeah, it's kind of like a FrameMaker publishing server on steroids, right? Where FrameMaker publishing server is going to allow you to specify, configure, and schedule all of your output requirements and in different locations, different conditions, all those different things. Well,
right.
the AEM workflows, as you can speak to, are going to add orders of magnitude in terms of the complexity that you could specify, and then it's a question of getting those workflows configured correctly.
Right. And then you're directly tied into the delivery platform itself, right? So yeah.
Yeah. You go back, change your topic, and then just set it and forget it.
Let them set it. Well, that's a different webinar.
All right. We do have a couple of new questions coming in, so we got plenty to work with until we get to. I would imagine you can stick around in the QA pod afterwards.
Yeah, so, I sure can.
I'll volunteer. Being an Adobe gent, I will volunteer you for that task. June Harton was asking, basically, does AEM support DITA files from Oxygen XML editor? And Oxygen not being the format, but simply being the editor. That's pretty easy. That's a pretty softball question for you there.
Yeah, I can knock that one right out of the park. So we actually support an integration with Oxygen. You can use that as your desktop editor if you want.
Great.
And because DITA is a standard and is portable, no real difference between the results you get in authoring in Oxygen versus the web editor. And it does come down to personal preference.
Versus the editor versus FrameMaker, right?
Right, yeah, that works too.
It's DITA.
Indeed.
Yep. Now, as a related question, and sorry, Allison, I'm going to skip over to another one of June's real quick, and then we'll get back to you. So she was asking about how robust, comparatively, the AEM XML editor is relative to the FrameMaker XML editor. So what are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, it depends on, first of all, your preference, right? And if you're PDF first, right, that's often a really good reason to use FrameMaker.
Mm-hmm.
But in either case, there's going to be some trade-offs, right? So in the web editor, you're not going to get that WYSIWYG PDF view.
Yeah.
Although we can configure it to use the CSS that'll be on the site eventually. So if you want a WYSIWYG experience for your web page, you can build that there.
Yeah. Well, I think it was it John from Briggs and Stratton, talking about how they were running into being PDF centric, they were running into those issues with the graphics sticking together and causing page breaks. Well, in the AEM editor, right, we're not going to have that issue because all we're doing is we're focusing on the content. And then that draws back to conversations we had with Mekon and with Julian, right? The more you focus on the content, the better. If you're going to focus only on content, the web editor is likely a really great, lean, fast choice where the formatting just takes care of itself. If you're trying to desktop publish, then that's where you may have a preference for an editor, whether it's FrameMaker or something like that, or whether you want to edit that content, not knowing 100% what the final product is going to look like on a page, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, and if you really want to focus on the content, you can write your DITA in something like Notepad.
Yeah.
I feel like doing that.
Zero formatting, zero relation. Of course, then you got to deal with the tags. So.
Yeah.
You might think that's funny, Chad, but I actually do that sometimes with Notepad++. So.
You think it's funny?
No, it's quite viable. It's just you just have to wade through the tags, right? And even then you have formatting in terms of the tags being colored. So there you
take
go.
Code highlighting and everything. There's not zero formatting. Yeah.
Pretty printing. Yeah.
Exactly.
How are we doing, Stefan? I know we've got a couple of more questions in there if we need some content.
While I was away, I didn't see. I don't see the questions as marked as answered. So I don't know which
Well,
are open yet and which not.
and let me keep going, since I kind of know.
I'll let you keep going for a minute more because we already have our next speakers in the room.
Okay. I did promise Allison that we get to her question. She had a question about can AEM convert Microsoft Publisher content? And I'll have a smile on my face as you answer that one.
I haven't tried, and I'm going to say no.
Yeah, any desktop publisher, right, where you've got multiple flows and multiple boxes. You know, how does one identify which flow connects with which? Where do the graphics go in a situation where you've plopped things all over the page in no specific order? So yeah, it makes it much more difficult, right?
I mean, we have a similar situation with InDesign, and with InDesign it's still possible.
Express, PageMaker, anything. Yeah.
Can convert InDesign files to AEM to DITA. However, InDesign also has an XML-based file format with IDML, and it's accessible. Microsoft Publisher, last time I looked at it, but that is 2-3 years back, was a completely binary format, and it had no XML export import functionalities or anything like that. So it's really like a closed can where you cannot access the content. So it would probably be copy and paste would be my hunch. But drop me an email, Alison. I have a couple of good contacts from people who are deep into content conversion tools. So maybe they have a solution for that. Drop me a line at gentz@adobe.com. Then I mark that.
Well, looks like a good time to trade chat off into the QA pod universe and then get moving. Good seeing you, man.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. Okay. You too. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, Chad.